I will try to fix you. When something breaks that cannot be restored, the work is not to fix. The work can't fix what is lost, but it can understand what was broken. Fixing often means covering up, covering over, erasing the mark of what happened. Repair, however, repair begins with truth. It begins when we say something like, something sacred was harmed here, and we choose not to look away. As we approach this season of gratitude and gathering, we remember that Thanksgiving is not only a day of celebration. For many, it's a day of mourning, a time to confront the stories that we've all been told and to listen for the truths that have often been silenced. Here in Newark, we gather on the traditional lands of the Lenape and the Nanticoke people, and they are not relics of the past, but living communities whose descendants still live here, teach here, and lead. The Thanksgiving story that many of us learned was about the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag sharing this peaceful meal, all smiles. And that's a partial truth at best. After 66 storm-filled days, 102 weary travelers aboard the Mayflower landed not where they intended, but in an abandoned Wampanoag village, devastated by disease brought by an earlier group of European ships. That first winter, nearly half of those settlers died. And when spring came, they actually met the Wampanoag leaders for the first time, some of whom spoke English. And together, they forged a fragile peace, a survival alliance built on necessity and some hope. And yes, after their first successful harvest together in 1621, the settlers and 90 Wampanoag shared a 3-day feast. But that was not the start of an enduring friendship. Within a single generation, the descendants of those settlers would seize the indigenous lands, enslave the Wampanoag people, and ignite what is known as King Philip's War, one of the bloodiest conflicts in American history. The generosity of the Wampanoag was repaid by betrayal and conquest. Beloveds, to grieve this is to love deeply. To love deeply is to honor the whole truth, holding space for the wrongs and the lack of care for everyone in the community. And if you hadn't picked up from earlier comments, that truth does not end in Plymouth. It reaches all the way here to the very roots of our own religious tradition. Beyond our brutal inheritance as colonialists, as Unitarian Universalists, we carry a painful piece of this history. In the 19th century, both the Unitarians and the Universalist denominations participated in the federal system of Indian boarding schools, institutions that were designed to assimilate Native children into white, Christian, Eurocentric culture by erasing their language, spirituality, and their identity. Under President Grant's so-called peace policy, Christian denominations were assigned to manage these Indian agencies. the then American Unitarian Association accepted contracts to oversee agencies and schools among the Dakota and the Yucatan Sioux and the Crow Creek in what is now South Dakota. There, these Unitarian teachers enforce the same assimilation policies that silence Native culture in the name of civilization. The Universalist church, though smaller in those days, was funding Indian missions and schools meant to convert and uplift indigenous children from their savage ways. The language of that time, words like civilize and Christianize and save, reveals a deep moral blindness, a belief that indigenous identity itself was something broken that needed fixing. We must name that this too is a part of our story. Our liberal faith, founded on freedom, reason, and tolerance, was complicit in the system of cultural genocide. And we can't undo that past. But we can refuse to repeat the patterns. The theology of fixing is dangerous. The theology of repair begins with humility. It means naming the Wampanoag, the Lenape, the Nanticoke, and every child who never came home. Who never came home from a boarding school because we would rather kill them than have them live an uncivilized life. Repair means asking, what do we do with this truth? What do we do with it now? And this is where Thanks-Grieving comes in. Thanks-Grieving invites us to hold two truths at once. Gratitude for what sustains us and what we have learned, and grief for the harm in the collective story. It's not a rejection of gratitude, of joy, but it calls us to deepen in our gratitude, to give thanks, not for what we've taken, but what we were taught. Taught by indigenous peoples whose resilience continues to shape this land. In 1970, Wamsutra Frank James, a Wampanoag elder, organized the first National Day of Mourning to tell the truth of Thanksgiving from the perspective of those colonized. He called the nation to remember that the story of the Pilgrims and the Indians feasting together was a lie. That day was not about bitterness, though. It was about truth and the first move toward healing. A healing that begins here, too, in our homes, in our congregations, among our denomination who is doing reparation work for the harm of the schools they participated in, and in our worship. It begins with teaching our children a fuller story, a real story. And when we lift up the names of those who endured, when we name the indigenous tribes, it deepens when we build relationships with Native-led organizations working for land restoration and language restoration and cultural preservation and justice. Repair begins with recognition. It deepens through relationship. And it takes root in our actions. So this is how we might make reparation. Not by erasing our holidays, but by transforming them into opportunities of truth-telling and renewal. By enduring our gratitude, ensuring that our gratitude for this is grounded in justice, and our grief becomes the catalyst for solidarity. Recently, I was with UU colleagues at the LaRedaCon. That's our religious educators conference held annually. And in that space, we welcomed an indigenous elder of the Wampanoag that shared their wisdom of repair and what that looks like. The statements that stuck with me were how they shared that the harm had to first be repaired with the earth, because they are people of the earth. The earth does not belong to the people. They spoke about how we must begin by reconnecting and restoring earth ways. And until we do this, we are not ready. We are not ready to tell the whole story or to be in relationship. Because when we repair our relationship with the earth, that will be the sign that we are ready to repair the relationship between peoples of the earth, of all peoples of the earth. So as we pause in a national day of Thanksgiving, may this be our prayer, our held close moment. That our gratitude be honest, and our grief be tender and held with care, and our repair guided by courage and love. May we carry this truth with us in our hearts and in our words and deeds, not as a weight, but as a gift we've been given. Because the people of the earth are waiting. They're still here on this land they call home. And we're still here too. Might we do this work together? Amen. And may it be so.